There are stories older than history and places older than memory. Long before the pyramids of Egypt rose from the sand, people were building. Quietly, carefully, leaving behind no written word. Only stone, soil, and silence. Across deserts, islands, and riverbeds, signs of civilization appear where no civilization should be. Walls without names, roads without cities. Entire societies erased not by war, but by time. What if Egypt wasn't the beginning? What if the story of human civilization didn't start where we were told, but stretched back through layers of forgotten earth? Join us as we uncover lost cities hidden beneath rivers, temples buried before kings, and builders who came before the first pharaoh. Their fingerprints remain on shattered pottery, aligned stones, and ancient fire pits scattered across the world, waiting. You won't find them in your textbooks, but they were there. Join us as we trace the civilizations that are older than Egypt itself. The stones beneath the Tigris. In the plains of southeastern Turkey, just north of the Syrian border, a site known as Göbekli Tepe remained buried under sediment and silence for thousands of years. Farmers had known of a hill there, a small rise in the land, but they thought little of it. In 1963, a joint team of Turkish and American researchers briefly surveyed the mound. They recorded some broken limestone slabs and moved on. It wasn't until 1994 that German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt returned to the site. What he found altered the timeline of human civilization. The stones were not natural. Carved pillars up to 6 meters tall were buried in neat circles. Each one weighed several tons. Some had reliefs of animals, lions, vultures, snakes, boars, chiseled in precise detail. The pillars were arranged in circular enclosures with 2 taller stones at the center. These central stones were often shaped like the letter T. Some believe they represented human figures, others are unsure. Carbon dating of the site revealed something unexpected. The oldest levels of Göbekli Tepe dated to around 9,600 BCE. This made the site more than 11,000 years old. By comparison, the pyramids of Egypt were built around 2,500 BCE. Göbekli Tepe was twice as old, older than Stonehenge, older than writing, older than agriculture. There were no signs of permanent settlement nearby, no houses, no farming tools. Whoever built the site was likely still a hunter-gatherer society. This challenged long-held assumptions. Archaeologists had believed that people began building large structures only after developing agriculture and permanent villages. Göbekli Tepe reversed this idea. It suggested that gathering for religious or communal rituals may have come first. Farming, perhaps, followed later to support the gatherings. Schmidt and his team uncovered only a fraction of the site. Most of it remained underground. Ground-penetrating radar showed more than 20 circular enclosures, but only a few were excavated. The builders had intentionally buried the site around 8,000 BCE. The reason is unknown. About 300 miles to the east, in northern Iraq, lies another site with deep roots, Karahantepe. Excavations began in the early 2000s. Like Göbekli Tepe, it contains T-shaped pillars and animal carvings. Some structures appear to predate the ones in Turkey. Together, these sites belong to what researchers call the Taş Tepeler, cultural zone spanning multiple locations that seem connected by shared symbols and techniques. Farther south, in the heart of Mesopotamia, a mound named Tel Brak revealed a vast settlement dating back to 6000 BCE. It was first surveyed in the 1930s and excavated more thoroughly in the early 2000s. Tel Brak wasn't just a settlement, it was a city with concentric zones of housing and ritual areas. But the most striking feature was the so-called Eye Temple. Hundreds of small clay figurines were found inside. They all had large, staring eyes. Their purpose is unknown. Tel Brak grew at a time when urban centres weren't supposed to exist. The traditional view held that cities began in southern Mesopotamia at Uruk or Eridu. But Tel Brak in the north shows that multiple centres of early civilization may have developed independently. Even older than these sites are the remains found near the Zagros Mountains. In Shanidar Cave, researchers in the 1950s discovered Neanderthal skeletons dating back 60 years. One of them, known as Shanidar I, showed signs of long-term care. His skull was damaged, his right arm missing, and he was partially blind, yet he had survived for years. Another skeleton, Shanidar IV, was buried with clusters of pollen. Some took this as evidence of early burial rituals. Others argue the pollen came from burrowing animals. The cave, however, became relevant again in 2018. A team from Cambridge University returned to Shanidar and discovered more remains this time. A crushed but articulated skeleton curled in a shallow pit. Its age was later confirmed to be around 70 years. The skeleton had been intentionally placed. Whether by Homo sapiens or Neanderthals remains uncertain. Along the border of Iran and Iraq, the city of Susa emerged around 4,200 BCE. But beneath its layers, older settlements dated back to at least 7,000 BCE. Susa was part of the Elamite civilization. The Elamites used a writing system that resembled cuneiform but was structurally different. Their language remains undeciphered. Some tablets refer to gods, to kings, to trade. Others carry unknown messages. Their temples were made of baked mud bricks. One ziggurat, dedicated to the god Inshushinak, stood over 25 meters tall. Susa coexisted with Sumer, but remained separate in language and culture. Their rivalry is recorded in later inscriptions. The Elamites would eventually sack her and carry away its treasures. But much of their early history remains lost. To the west, in the Levant, lies the site of Jericho. Archaeologists unearthed a tower there, built from stone, dated to around 8000 BCE. The tower stands over 8 meters tall and is connected to a wall. Jericho is considered one of the oldest continuously inhabited places on Earth, but its earliest structures remain difficult to interpret. Were they defensive, ritual, something else? In the same region, the site of Ain Ghazal in modern Jordan revealed statues made of plaster and reed. These human figures, with wide eyes and flat faces, date to 7,200 BCE. They were buried beneath houses. Some had 2 heads. Their purpose is unknown. A similar mystery lies under the sands of Iran, in the ancient site of Tepe Sialk. First excavated in the 1930s, its earliest layers go back to 6000 BCE. Sialk produced some of the earliest examples of painted ceramics. Later levels showed evidence of metallurgy, but the deeper levels suggest a form of organized settlement without known temples or rulers. These ancient places remain quiet. Their stones, broken walls, and weathered carvings give no answers. But they sit, older than pyramids, older than names. Their builders are gone, their beliefs unrecorded. The forgotten builders of Çatalhöyük. In the dry plains of central Anatolia, a low mound sits quietly under the sun. Its surface is unremarkable at first glance, but beneath it lies one of the oldest and most densely populated human settlements ever discovered. The site is called Çatalhöyük. It was first excavated in the 1960s by archaeologist James Mellard. At the time, few had seen anything like it. Çatalhöyük was occupied from around 7,500 BCE to 5,700 BCE. It existed before writing, before metal tools, before kings. The settlement stretched over 13 hectares at its height. It housed thousands of people, yet there were no roads, no palaces, no temples. Instead, the buildings were packed tightly together. Walls shared walls. Roofs connected to other roofs. People moved between homes by walking across the rooftops and descending through ladders into their rooms. Each structure was a single family unit. Inside, the rooms were uniform. They had plastered walls, raised platforms for sleeping, and hearths for cooking. Many had wall paintings, abstract shapes, handprints, leopards, vultures, and hunting scenes. Some rooms had reliefs made from moulded plaster. Bull skulls bucrania were embedded into the walls, their horns protruding. They may have been symbolic or protective, or simply decorative. Under the platforms where people slept, archaeologists found burials. Family members were often buried beneath the floor of their homes, adults, children, and infants. Some graves were reused. Sometimes older remains were moved aside to make room. The practice shows continuity. People lived and died in the same space. Their homes became tombs. Their tombs remained homes. In one house, the skeleton of a young woman was found. Her skull had been removed after burial. In another, the bones of a man were buried with red ochre and beads. Some skeletons were missing heads. These skulls had been retrieved, painted, and perhaps displayed. One was found plastered and painted in a nearby room. Its eyes had been recreated with pigment. There were no public buildings at Çatalhöyük, no central square, no monumental statues. The city appeared to function without rulers or temples. Ian Hodder, who resumed excavations in the 1990s, called it a city without hierarchy. The layout, uniform housing, and repeated domestic rituals suggested a shared belief system that didn't require central authority. Still, patterns emerged. Some buildings had more wall art, more bucrania, more burials. These might have been shrines or ceremonial houses. They looked like regular homes but had symbolic weight. People may have gathered there to remember ancestors or conduct rituals. Artifacts at the site included obsidian tools, baskets, clay figurines, and carved bone objects. The obsidian came from the volcanic mountains of eastern Turkey, more than 200 kilometers away. This suggests trade networks. One female figurine, seated with large hips and feline armrests, was found buried beneath a platform. Some interpreted it as a fertility goddess. Others see it as a symbol of status or protection. The people of Çatalhöyük cultivated wheat and barley. They herded sheep and goats, but they also hunted. Animal bones found in refuse piles show that aurochs, deer, and wild boar were common prey. The diet was varied. The people ground grain using large stone tools, leaving behind floors coated with fine white dust. Their society left no written records. Everything is inferred from objects, bones, and architecture. One room had a painting that resembled a volcanic eruption. It showed a mountain, possibly Hasan Dağı, with twin peaks and black shapes at its base. Some believe this is the world's oldest map, a depiction of the settlement and the nearby volcano erupting. Others say it's symbolic. Its meaning remains unclear. The buildings were made of mud brick and plaster. They were rebuilt on the same spot again and again. Over time, layers accumulated. Older homes were buried under newer ones. This process formed the mound itself, one home atop another, for centuries. Çatalhöyük lasted for about 400 years. Then it was abandoned. The reasons are unknown. There are no signs of sudden disaster, no fire, no war. Perhaps climate shifted, or resources declined, or beliefs changed. What remains is a dense cluster of homes, layered through time, silent beneath the sun. Carvings in the ice of Karelia. Near the cold lakes of northwestern Russia, along the ancient shores of Lake Onega and the White Sea, thousands of figures are carved into the exposed granite. These petroglyphs, known as the Zalavruga and Besov Nos petroglyphs, remained hidden in plain sight for millennia. Snow, lichen, and erosion concealed them. Only when the surface was cleaned did the pictures begin to emerge. The carvings were made between 5000 BCE and 4000 BCE, long before the pyramids of Egypt were built. They are older than the invention of the wheel, older than most known writing systems. The people who made them lived during the Neolithic period. They had no cities, no metal, no texts, but they carved the stone. In Zalavruga, the carvings stretch across smooth rock surfaces near the river's edge. The figures are shallow but clear. There are scenes of hunting, elk with long necks, fish with curved tails, men with bows. One large panel shows a group of hunters surrounding an animal with spears raised. The detail suggests planning, coordination, and memory. These were not random scratches, they were records. The carvings at the White Sea are more expansive. Hundreds of images were etched into the rock, many showboats, some small, some long, with multiple human figures inside. The lines are straight and deliberate. Some boats have curved prows, others have figures with arms raised, holding what may be oars or spears. These boats appear to move across the stone, each one part of a larger rhythm. Alongside the boats are abstract figures, spirals, grids, crosses. One symbol repeats often, a circle with a line across it. Its meaning is unknown. Some believe it marks the sun. Others think it may be a counting system. But no consensus exists. The figures are not always realistic. Some humans have elongated limbs. Others have multiple arms. There are scenes that may depict rituals. One carving shows a man with a bird's head. Another shows a figure standing over a reclining body, arms extended. The purpose of these images is uncertain. Some carvings appear layered. Older images were scratched over or added to. This suggests that the site remained active for centuries. Generations returned to the same rock, adding new figures. The granite became a canvas for memory. No written language accompanied the carvings. The people who made them left no inscriptions. Their bones, tools, and settlements have been found nearby. Stone axes, bone harpoons, hearths and ash layers. They lived in small wooden huts near rivers and lakes. Their lives revolved around fishing and hunting. Reindeer, elk, seals, and fish formed the basis of their food supply. Excavations in the region revealed burial sites. Some skeletons were covered with red ochre. Others were buried with tools or beads. A child was found with a carved bone amulet. These suggest belief in an afterlife, or at least care for the dead. One of the oldest sites near the White Sea, known as Verity, contained wooden planks arranged in a circular pattern. Beneath them were traces of fire. Some archaeologists interpret this as a ritual space. Others see it as a simple shelter. Without written records, the purpose is left open. The people of Karelia were not isolated. Obsidian from far regions was found near their settlements. Animal bones from distant species were also recovered. These hint at trade networks or seasonal migration. The carvings may reflect stories of travel, of meeting, of exchange. In 2021, researchers used 3D scanning to document the carvings in high resolution. The new imaging revealed faint figures missed by earlier surveys. Some were barely visible, just shallow scratches. Others had been altered by centuries of water and ice. The scanning confirmed the scale. Over 20, 0 individual carvings across the region. The weather patterns of Karelia shift slowly. Snow covers the rock for much of the year. During summer, the sun rises early and sets late, casting long shadows across the stone. These shadows, researchers believe, may have played a role in how the carvings were viewed. As the sun moved, different figures lit up, others vanished. The carvings may have been part of a seasonal rhythm, viewed only at certain times. No temples have been found, no permanent dwellings remain, but the consistency of the art, the skill of the engravings, and the repetition of forms suggest cultural continuity. The same boats, the same animals, the same shapes, passed down over generations. To the west, in parts of Scandinavia, similar petroglyphs have been found. Some match the Karelia style: boats, hunters, and animals. This suggests a shared tradition across northern Eurasia, a symbolic language spread not by words, but by images on stone. In the 19th century, when the petroglyphs were first noticed, local legends spoke of the White Sea people who lived before history. Some said the carvings were made by giants. Others thought they were signs from spirits. It wasn't until the 20th century that archaeologists began formal documentation. Even now, much of the granite remains unsurveyed. The carvings do not speak, they do not explain themselves, but they remain, silent, etched into the ancient rock, markers of thought, of movement, of memory, from a time when Egypt had not yet risen, when cities were unknown, and yet someone took the time to carve boats and elk into the stone. And those marks still remain. The circle beneath the English soil. Near the salt marshes of Norfolk, England, a circle of oak posts once stood, half buried in the wet earth. It was uncovered in 1998, when shifting tides revealed its dark outline. Archaeologists named it Seahenge. It was not made of stone. Its posts were wooden, sharpened at one end and arranged in a near-perfect circle. At the centre stood a large, upturned tree stump, its roots pointing toward the sky. The site was dated to around 2049 BCE. This placed it in the early Bronze Age, but its style echoed older Neolithic practices. Nearby, another timber circle called Home II was found, built at the same time. These circles, preserved in peat and silt, offer rare glimpses into a wooden ritual tradition that has mostly vanished. Unlike stone, wood decays. Most of the earliest ceremonial structures in Britain were built of timber. Few remain. Further inland, in Wiltshire, other circular traces have been found. Long before Stonehenge took its final form, circular ditches and timber arrangements already dotted the landscape. One of the largest is Durrington Walls. It lies just 2 miles northeast of Stonehenge. The site spans over 450 metres in diameter. It was surrounded by a ditch and an inner bank. Excavations revealed traces of timber posts arranged in circular patterns. These once formed large wooden buildings, possibly halls or gathering places. The site dates to around 2600 BCE. It overlaps with the construction phases of Stonehenge. But Durrington Walls is different. Its remains suggest habitation. Animal bones, pottery shards, and hearths were found throughout the site. Analysis of pig bones showed that the animals were slaughtered in winter. This indicates that people gathered seasonally, perhaps, for midwinter rituals. In 2009, geophysical surveys around Stonehenge revealed another buried circle. This one, made entirely of timber posts, was named the Southern Circle. It sits near the River Avon and aligns with the sunrise during the summer solstice. Like Durrington, the timber circle likely served as a ceremonial gathering place. The alignment suggests an awareness of solar cycles and a deliberate relationship between the land and the sky. Even older is the site of Mount Pleasant near Dorchester. This Neolithic enclosure consists of a large circular bank and ditch, about 370 metres across. Inside were timber structures and smaller ring features. It dates to around 2500 BCE. Like other sites, it was likely used for gatherings, rituals, or seasonal observations. Earlier still is the structure known as the causewayed enclosure. These were among the first large-scale constructions in prehistoric Britain. They date as far back as 3700 BCE. Made of interrupted ditches and earth banks, they form irregular circles or ovals. They are found across southern England and parts of Wales. The function of these enclosures remains uncertain. Some contained animal bones and pottery. Others held human remains. They may have been used for trade, ceremony, or burial. On Orkney, a group of islands off the northern coast of Scotland, lies another ancient site, the Ness of Brodgar. It is older than Durrington and Stonehenge. Occupied between 3300 BCE and 2300 BCE, the Ness includes stone buildings, paved walkways, and carved stone slabs. One large structure, known as Structure 10, measures over 20 metres long. Its walls are over a metre thick. Inside were painted walls, decorated stones, and evidence of controlled burning. The site may have served as a ceremonial complex. Nearby stands the Ring of Brodgar. This stone circle is over 100 metres in diameter. It originally held 60 megaliths, of which 36 remain. It is surrounded by a deep rock-cut ditch. The builders had no metal tools. They carved the ditch using stone hammers and antler picks. The ring aligns with solstices and lunar cycles. It shares features with Stonehenge, but is part of a much older northern tradition. Another circle, the Standing Stones of Stennis, lies close by. It is smaller, but more precisely aligned. Radiocarbon dates place its construction around 3100 BCE. These circles, combined with passage tombs like Maeshowe, form a dense ceremonial landscape on Orkney. The scale and planning of these monuments suggest coordinated effort, shared beliefs, and a complex understanding of time and space. Most of these early sites lacked writing. There were no inscriptions, no recorded names. The meaning of the circles must be read from their layout, their alignment, and their material traces. Burnt bone, animal remains, smashed pottery, these speak in fragments. A pig roast, a gathering, a burial, a seasonal return. The landscape of Britain once held hundreds of such monuments. Many are now lost, destroyed by farming or buried beneath modern towns. Others remain as crop marks, faint circles that appear in aerial photographs when the soil retains more moisture than the surrounding ground. These ghost circles mark places where posts once stood. They are reminders of vanished traditions. In 2015, a massive geophysical survey revealed a previously unknown monument beneath the grass near Durrington Walls. It was a row of over 90 standing stones buried under the earth. Some stones had been removed. Others had been pushed over and buried. The structure, called the Superhenge, was nearly 500 metres long. Its purpose is unknown. It may have formed a boundary or a processional route. Its discovery suggests that many more monuments lie hidden beneath the English soil. Unlike Egypt's pyramids, these early British structures were not tombs for kings. They held no golden treasures. Their grandeur was not in height, but in arrangement. Circles of timber, ditches and banks, processional paths. Their builders worked in wood and earth, in silence and repetition. Their tools were stone. Their calendars were shadows. Echoes from the Tassili Plateau. In the deep southeast of Algeria, where the Sahara stretches into stone, lies a range of eroded sandstone known as the Tassili Nadjer. From above, it looks like a labyrinth of canyons and pillars, but within its worn walls, preserved by dryness and silence, are thousands of images painted long ago. These paintings, found in shallow caves and rock shelters, are some of the oldest and most mysterious artworks in the world. The site was first brought to international attention in the 1930s by French explorer Charles Brennens. In the 1950s, ethnologist Henri Lotte led several expeditions to the region. What they documented surprised many. The images were not just animals or handprints, as seen in other prehistoric art. They included scenes of daily life, dancing figures, masked beings, and floating shapes. Some images were over 7,000 years old. Others dated back as far as 10,000 BCE. The Sahara, now a desert, was once green. Between 10,000 and 4,000 BCE, it experienced what researchers call the African humid period. Monsoon rains reached far north. Lakes formed, grasslands spread. Animals like giraffes, elephants, and hippos roamed freely. The rock art of Tassili reflects this. There are scenes of herds being led, people with bows and arrows, groups dancing in circles, boats moving across wide bodies of water. One of the most debated images is a large figure wearing a rounded mask and a head covering. It appears to hover, arms raised. Some called it the Great Martian. Others see it as a shaman in trance. The figure is not alone. Nearby are smaller beings with similar masks. They are drawn with dotted lines, curved shapes, and unusual proportions. Some researchers suggest these were representations of ritual, altered states, or myths. Others warn against projecting modern ideas onto ancient art. The figures are painted in red, ochre, black, and white. Natural pigments were used: iron oxide for red, charcoal for black, kaolin for white. Brushes may have been made from animal hair or plant fibers. In some shelters, figures were carved into the rock instead of painted. These engravings include giraffes, cattle, and abstract signs. They are less detailed, but equally persistent. The rock art of Tassili is divided into phases. The earliest is the round head period, beginning around 8000 BCE. It features large, circular-headed figures with no facial features. Their bodies are elongated, their limbs taper. They appear in floating postures, surrounded by dots or rays. Some seem to be falling, others dance in lines. The next phase is the pastoral period, beginning around 5000 BCE. It reflects the domestication of animals. Cattle are drawn in great numbers. Herders lead them with sticks. Some scenes show milking. Others show cattle with decorated horns. This suggests a symbolic importance beyond food. The horse period follows, around 1500 BCE. It introduces chariots and mounted riders. The art becomes more schematic. People are drawn with geometric torsos and stick-like limbs. Weapons appear more often. This period marks a shift, possibly reflecting conflict, movement, or new cultural groups entering the region. Finally, the camel period appears around 500 BCE. It shows domesticated camels, indicating the return of arid conditions. The Sahara was drying again. The rains had moved south. The lakes shrank. The people who had once painted the walls moved with the retreating grasslands, or disappeared. No written language accompanies the images. The people of Tassili left no known inscriptions. Their names are unknown, their language is lost. Only their images remain. Henri Lot's interpretations were dramatic. He described the roundhead figures as astronauts or gods. His writings drew attention from both scholars and fringe theorists. Over time, however, archaeologists revised his conclusions. They noted that similar masked figures appear in modern Saharan rituals. The floating postures may reflect spiritual experiences. The dots and lines could represent movement, sound, or trance. In one shelter, a group of figures surrounds a central character. Their arms are raised. The central figure holds a curved object. It may be a musical instrument or a ritual item. The scene is quiet but structured. Each figure has space. The arrangement is deliberate. The location of the paintings is also important. They are found high in the cliffs, far from modern paths. Some require climbing, others are deep within narrow canyons. These places are not practical for daily life. They may have been chosen for seclusion, for ceremony, for memory. Traces of habitation have been found nearby. Hearths, stone tools, grinding stones. Some shelters contain the remains of ochre pots. Others hold carved stones with geometric patterns. These objects suggest continuity ritual linked to art linked to place. The Tassili Plateau spans over 70 square kilometers. Most of it is uninhabited. Many shelters remain undocumented. Wind and time have faded some paintings, others remain vivid. The dry air preserves them. But they are fragile. In 1982, the site was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List. Conservation efforts began. Yet, damage continues. Some paintings have been defaced, others stolen. The remoteness that protected the art now makes it difficult to guard. Still, the figures remain. Thousands of years after they were painted, they continue to watch from the rock. They do not speak. But their silence carries something forward, a memory of rain, of masked dancers, of people who lived before the desert returned. The stone alignments of Nabta Playa. Far south of Cairo, beyond the cultivated banks of the Nile, the desert stretches into silence. Near the border with Sudan, in what is now called the Nubian Desert, a basin once held seasonal lakes fed by monsoon rains. Today it is dry, but around 11 years ago it supported small communities. In this arid emptiness lies Nabta Playa, a scatter of stones, buried structures, and ancient alignments that may mark one of the oldest ceremonial landscapes in North Africa. The site was first documented in the 1970s. Excavations began in earnest in the 1990s, led by Fred Wendorf and his team from Southern Methodist University. What they found challenged conventional timelines. The area showed repeated seasonal occupation beginning around 9000 BCE. By 6000 BCE, the people who visited Nabta Playa had begun placing large stones upright in the sand. Some were buried in shallow pits, others stood in patterns that pointed toward the rising sun or specific stars. One of the most studied features is a stone circle, roughly 4 meters across. It contains upright slabs, carefully arranged, with 2 pairs of larger stones aligned to the summer solstice sunrise. When viewed from a central point, the sun would rise between the tallest stones on the longest day of the year. This solar alignment indicates planning, observation, and repetition across generations. Nearby are lines of stones, some over 2 meters tall, positioned across the desert floor. These align with celestial bodies, particularly Sirius and Orion's belt. Astronomer Thomas Brophy proposed that these stones may have recorded the position of stars over thousands of years. His interpretations remain debated, but the stones themselves remain unchanged, fixed against the horizon. Beneath the sand, archaeologists found round and oval structures. These were not homes. They appear to be ceremonial enclosures or shrines. Inside, some contained small mounds, offering pits or animal remains. The people who built them returned seasonally. They followed the rains. They herded cattle, gathered plants, and observed the sky. Animal bones, especially those of cattle, were found buried in deliberate ways. Some were placed in shallow pits. Others were arranged beside small stone markers. This has led some researchers to describe Nabta Playa as a cattle cult site. The care given to the remains suggests that cattle held symbolic meaning, not just food, but a form of ritual offering. By 5500 BCE, burial tumuli appear. These are small mounds with central pits, covered in stones. One of them contained the remains of a young individual. The body was buried with carved stone bowls and bone tools. Another grave held 2 cattle skulls. The presence of burials and offerings suggests that Nabta Playa was more than a campsite. It was a place of memory and belief. Pottery fragments found at the site are among the oldest in the Nile region. Their designs are simple incised lines, geometric patterns. Some resemble pottery later found in Upper Egypt. This suggests cultural continuity or contact between desert and river communities. The The people of Nabta Playa had no writing, no monuments of stone like the later pyramids. But they watched the sky, they arranged stones to match celestial events, they buried their dead with care, they marked the solstice with silent alignments. Some scholars have suggested that the knowledge preserved at Nabta Playa of stars, of time, of ritual, migrated with its people as the climate changed. Around 5000 BCE, the African humid period ended. The rains retreated, the lakes dried, the grasslands turned to sand. The people who once gathered at Nabta Playa began to move. Some may have gone east to the Nile, others disappeared into the desert. The legacy of Nabta Playa is not in cities or kings. It is in stones placed by hand, aligned with light, left to endure in open air. The site shows that long before the dynasties of Egypt, long before writing, there were those who measured time by the stars and marked it with stone. In 2007, a portion of the stone circle was relocated to the Nubian Museum in Aswan to protect it from damage. A replica was placed at the original site, yet much of Nabta Playa remains unexcavated. The sands shift slowly, covering and uncovering the past. Satellite imagery shows other clusters of stones nearby, some in rows, others in circles. The region is vast. Its silence hides unknown patterns. Each new discovery adds another quiet note to a history written in shadow and orientation. Nabta Playa remains a meeting point between desert and memory, between observation and belief. A calendar in stone, a circle where the sky once met the earth. The deep wells of Göbekli's sister site. In the dry plateaus of southeastern Turkey, about 35 kilometers from Göbekli Tepe, a second site lay silent beneath layers of earth and sediment. It was known locally, but not studied in detail until the early 21st century. The site is called Karahan Tepe. Like its more famous counterpart, it features T-shaped stone pillars, animal carvings, and deliberate architectural patterns. But Karahan Tepe may go even further back in time. Excavations began in earnest around 2019. The Şanlıurfa Museum and the Turkish Ministry of Culture directed the work. What they uncovered was not a replica of Göbekli Tepe, but something older, deeper, and more complex. The terrain at Karahan Tepe includes a natural rock face. Into this rock, the builders carved chambers, niches, and vertical shafts. The architecture appears both monumental and intimate. At the heart of the site is a long, narrow subterranean chamber. Its walls are smooth. Along the walls, rows of rectangular recesses are cut into the stone. Their purpose is unknown. They are evenly spaced, as if for ritual display or storage. In the center of this chamber stands a carved human figure emerging directly from the bedrock. It is life-sized, its arms are crossed. Its head leans slightly downward. It does not appear to have been moved or installed, it was carved in place, from the living rock itself. Nearby, circular enclosures feature upright pillars arranged in regular patterns. Like Göbekli Tepe, the pillars are shaped like a T. They are made from limestone and stand up to 3 meters tall. Some bear carvings, snakes, boars, birds, and geometric symbols. The animals are not decorative, they are placed with intention. Many face inward toward the center of each circle. One structure contains a deep, circular well carved straight into the limestone. It is smooth, precise, and vertical. At the bottom, a small platform is cut into one side. Its depth makes it inaccessible without effort. The shaft does not appear functional, it holds no water. It may have been symbolic, or it may have served a purpose, now lost. The site includes channels carved into bedrock. These run from one enclosure to another. Some lead toward natural outcrops, others terminate in basins or hollows. Researchers debate whether these carried liquids water, blood, or oil, or whether they were purely symbolic pathways. Fragments of obsidian tools and limestone vessels were recovered. The obsidian came from volcanic regions over 100 kilometers away. This suggests trade or movement. Some vessels were left in niches or buried near pillars. Their placement appears intentional, part of a broader ritual system. There are no signs of permanent settlement at Karahan Tepe. No domestic architecture, no grinding stones, no hearths. The site was not a village. It was a place people came to, likely at specific times, for specific reasons. The precision of the architecture and the repetition of certain forms suggest memory, ritual, and planning across generations. The dating of Karahan Tepe remains under study, but preliminary results suggest construction began around 9,500 BCE, possibly as early as 9,600 BCE. This places it in the same time frame as the earliest layers of Göbekli Tepe. Some researchers propose that Karahan Tepe may be older. Others suggest it was part of a regional tradition, a network of ceremonial sites, each with its own variation. Together with Göbekli Tepe, Nivali Chori, and Sefer Tepe, Karahan Tepe belongs to what archaeologists call the Tash Tepala group. These sites are scattered across the Urfa region. All feature large-scale stone architecture, anthropomorphic pillars, and no signs of farming. They were built by mobile people hunter-gatherers, yet they left behind structures of complexity and permanence. The carvings at Karahan Tepe are distinct. One image shows a vulture with outstretched wings, its head turned to one side. Another shows a snake with its body wrapped around a pillar base. A third shows a humanoid figure holding its genitalia with both hands. The figure's mouth is open. The meaning is unknown. Some see fertility, others see dominance, others see myth. Unlike at Göbekli Tepe, where the central pillars are freestanding, many of the sculptures at Karahan Tepe are part of the rock itself. They emerge from the ground or the wall. This suggests a different relationship between architecture and art, less modular, more embedded. The builders used stone tools. There is no evidence of metal, yet the surfaces are smooth, the cuts are precise. The planning required coordination and knowledge. The movement of heavy stone pillars, some weighing several tons, suggests organized labor. Karahan Tepe was eventually buried, like Göbekli. The fill was not random. It consisted of broken stone, soil, and refuse. The burial appears deliberate. Whether it was meant to close the site, protect it, or transition it to another phase is unknown. The silence of Karahan Tepe is complete. There is no writing, no recorded name, no known language. Only patterns of stone, repetition of form, and figures staring from the shadows of cut rock. They offer no answers, only presence. In 2023, researchers continued scanning the area with ground-penetrating radar. Additional structures were identified beneath the surface, some circular, others rectangular. Each suggests further phases of construction. The site is not finished. It continues to emerge. Karahan Tepe stands not as a ruin, but as a fragment, a preserved gesture from people who lived at the edge of memory, older than writing, older than metal, older than the Nile's temples or Mesopotamia's cities. The lost roads of the Supe Valley. In the dry coastal desert of Peru, near the mouth of the Supe River, a set of stone mounds rise from the earth. From a distance they resemble natural hills, but as the wind clears the dust, their flat tops and steep sides emerge. This is Caral, a city older than the Inca, older than the Maya, and older than the pyramids of Egypt. Caral was first noted in the 1940s. Archaeologists dismissed it as too eroded, too plain, too early. It lacked ceramics. It lacked decoration. But in the 1990s, Peruvian archaeologist Ruth Shady excavated deeper. What she uncovered reshaped timelines. Carbon dating of organic material reed baskets, woven textiles, and burned plant remains revealed a date of 2600 BCE. Later, earlier layers suggested a beginning as far back as 3000 BCE. Caral is now recognized as the heart of the Norte Xico civilization, also known as the Caral soup culture. It predates the Olmec of Mesoamerica by over 1,000 years. It was built during the same centuries as the early dynasties of Egypt and the first bricks of Sumer. The site covers more than 150 acres. It includes 6 large platform mounds, circular sunken plazas, long staircases, and broad stone walkways. The structures are made from stone and mortar, reinforced with woven reed mesh to resist earthquakes. The largest mound, called the Pyramid Mare, rises 28 meters high. It is built in stepped layers, accessed by a central staircase. It faces the central plaza, where gatherings likely took place. No signs of warfare have been found at Caral. No defensive walls, no weapons, no evidence of conflict. This sets it apart from many ancient cities. Its layout suggests ceremony, not conquest. The buildings are oriented with precision, many aligned to the surrounding mountains or to solar events. The sunken circular plazas, found in front of several pyramids, suggest a ceremonial or communal function. Their construction required coordination. Their symmetry was intentional. Artifacts from Caral are few but meaningful. Small flutes made from condor and pelican bones were recovered. The flutes have finger holes and showware from use. Others were made from llama bones. A collection of antler-shaped instruments may have been used to keep rhythm. These musical tools suggest that performance, sound, and movement were part of public life. One object shows the form of a monkey, stylized and abstract. Its purpose is unclear. Caral's art is not abundant, but it appears in the form of textiles, gourd carvings, and spatial design. Color came from natural pigments. Decoration was minimal, but space was used expressively. Strangely, Caral developed without ceramics. The people cooked using heated stones placed in baskets or shallow pits, yet they grew cotton, beans, squash, and guava. The cotton was likely used to make fishing nets, which were then traded with coastal communities in exchange for seafood. Fishing sustained Caral's population. Shells, dried fish, and anchovies were found in storerooms. Inland, irrigation canals fed fields. Farming and fishing supported each other. Caral's reach extended beyond its walls. Its influence is seen in neighbouring valleys, where similar architectural forms appear. A quipu-like device was found at the site. Quipus are knotted strings used later by the Inca for record-keeping. The Caral version was simpler, but it suggests that information may have been encoded using fibre and knot. Caral had a hierarchy, but no clear evidence of kings. The central structures were likely built by communal labour. Some buildings show signs of exclusive use, possibly by priests or elites, but there are no tombs, no names, no recorded titles. In one room, archaeologists found the remains of a young boy buried beneath the floor. He was not placed with riches. He was alone. Nearby, a set of burnt offerings, corn, seeds, and ash, suggested ritual use. Another room held the preserved remains of a llama fetus. These offerings appear symbolic. The city was part of a network. At least 18 nearby sites share Caral's layout. Roads simple, straight, and narrow connect them. Some follow the contours of the land. Others extend across flat desert. They appear more ceremonial than practical. Processional paths, perhaps, walked at certain times of the year. The desert has preserved Caral. There is no rain, no vegetation to overtake the stone. The wind brushes sand across the plazas, but the structures endure. Their outlines remain clear. Their orientation remains unchanged. Caral declined around 1800 BCE. The reason is unknown. There are no signs of fire or attack. The river may have shifted, crops may have failed, or the society may have slowly dissolved, its people moving to newer centers. Even now, the city remains quiet. There are no inscriptions, no language has survived, but the plazas and pyramids, the staircases and plazas, stand open to the sky. They belong to a people who measured space with care, who used music and rhythm, and who built without walls. The buried faces of Ain Ghazal. In the hills near modern-day Amman, Jordan, construction workers in the 1980s broke ground for a new highway. As machines cut through the soil, they revealed layers of stone, ash, and clay. Archaeologists were called in. What they found beneath the surface was a large Neolithic settlement. The site was named Ain Ghazal, Spring of the Gazelle. It would become one of the most important prehistoric discoveries in the Near East. Ain Ghazal was occupied from around 7,250 BCE to 5,000 BCE. At its height, it covered over 15 hectares and may have housed more than 30 people. This made it one of the largest settlements of its time, older than Jericho's walls, and long before the rise of Sumer or Egypt. The people of Ain Ghazal lived in rectangular houses made of mud brick. The floors were plastered and often repainted. Some homes were rebuilt in the same spot for generations. What set Ain Ghazal apart was not just its size, but what was buried beneath its homes. Under the plastered floors, archaeologists discovered human remains carefully arranged, layered, and in some cases, altered. The most striking of these were skulls. Some had been removed after death. The lower jaw was discarded. The cranium was coated with plaster. Eyes were shaped with bitumen or cowrie shells. These skulls were not buried randomly. They were placed in special pits, often together. This practice was not unique to Ain Ghazal. Similar skulls have been found at Jericho and other early sites. But here, the pattern was widespread. It suggested a ritual of remembrance or veneration. The dead were not forgotten. They were shaped, preserved, and returned to the ground beneath the living. In 1983, a discovery changed the scope of the site. Deep inside a pit, archaeologists uncovered 2 caches of human-like statues. There were 32 in total. Some were busts. Others were full-bodied figures. The tallest stood over 1 meter high. They were made from lime plaster, shaped around reed cores. Their faces were wide, with flat noses and large, staring eyes. The eyes were made with crushed bitumen and painted black. Some figures had double heads. Others had detailed torsos, with marks suggesting clothing or tattoos. These statues are among the oldest known large-scale human representations ever made. They date to around 6,500 BCE. They were not displayed, they were not broken by accident. They were buried, whole and face-up, in specially prepared pits. Their purpose remains unknown. The people of Ain Ghazal farmed barley and wheat. They raised goats and hunted gazelle. They made tools from flint and obsidian. Their pottery came late. Most of their culture was pre-ceramic. They used baskets, woven mats, and storage pits. Their houses were arranged in neighborhoods, with open spaces between clusters. Some homes contained small altars. Others had hearths with ash layers and animal bones. A distinct building type appeared longer than normal, with thicker walls and no sign of domestic use. These may have been communal or ritual spaces. They lacked decoration but stood apart in scale. One of these buildings held the remains of a burned offering. Another contained a series of shallow pits, some empty, others filled with bone and ash. As the settlement grew, the environment changed. Deforestation, overgrazing, and shifts in rainfall patterns began to stress the land. Erosion increased, yields declined. The community responded by moving buildings, adapting crop choices, and eventually shrinking in size. By 5000 BCE, the site was largely abandoned. No writing survives, no names, no records, but the statues speak in silence. Their faces, stylized and unblinking, suggest something more than art, perhaps ancestors, perhaps spirits, perhaps only questions. The site revealed another pattern: intentional disposal of symbolic objects, broken figurines, burned remains, carefully placed artifacts in pits. This was not refuse, it was structured. There was an order, even if the meaning is unclear. In one burial, the bones of a child were found with a carved stone pendant. In another, the remains of an adult were buried without the head. Nearby, a plastered skull lay in a separate pit. The connections are uncertain, but the repetition suggests rules. Patterns of treatment, belief. Excavations at Ain Ghazal paused and resumed over several decades. Today, much of the site lies under the city. Some statues are displayed in the Jordan Museum, others are in storage. The plaster is fragile. It decays with moisture and time. But efforts continue to preserve and scan them. The faces of Ain Ghazal do not resemble portraits. They are abstract, smooth, and wide-eyed. Yet they are human. They mark a moment when people shaped images of themselves, tall, fragile, and silent, before metal, before cities, before memory. The shadow temples of Wadi Fainan. In the arid expanse of southern Jordan, between the Dead Sea and the Red Sea, a narrow valley cuts through the mountains. This is Wadi Fainan. Today, it is quiet. A few shrubs grow near dried streambeds. The stone hills are streaked with copper green. But thousands of years ago, this valley was active, an early center of mining, gathering, and something more elusive: ritual. Archaeological work in the area began in the 1980s and expanded in the decades that followed. The region revealed layers of human presence, stretching back to the Epipaleolithic period. But the Neolithic levels, dating from roughly 1100 to 60 years ago, show a change in rhythm. Seasonal camps became permanent structures. Scattered bands gathered into early villages. Across the valley floor and into the surrounding cliffs, remnants of architecture began to appear. At a site called WF16, excavations uncovered circular buildings made from stone and mud. These were not homes. Their size, central placement, and internal features suggested a different function. Many had plastered floors, benches along the walls, and central hearths. One structure had a large circular platform, cut smooth, with a polished surface that reflected light. Another had a shallow basin surrounded by arranged stones. These were places for gathering. The buildings often lacked domestic features: no grinding stones, no storage pits, no sleeping areas. Instead, they held unusual objects: carved stone tablets, figurines shaped from fired clay, animal bones arranged deliberately. One small figure, shaped like a human, was placed beneath a plastered floor. Its head was turned to the side. Nearby, a carved stone disc lay face up in a pit. The people of Wadi Fainan were not yet farmers, but they were beginning to settle. They hunted gazelle and deer. They gathered wild plants. They began to manage goat herds. They lived in round houses with stone foundations and thatched roofs. But beside these homes were other structures, larger, cleaner, and more formal. Some archaeologists call these temples. Others prefer ritual buildings. The term remains debated, but their placement and care suggest they were shared, not private, not domestic. Their construction required effort and coordination. The valley also shows signs of early copper use. Malachite green copper ore streaks the rocks. In shallow pits and slag heaps, archaeologists found traces of ancient mining. People dug into soft veins with stone tools. They used fire to weaken rock, then chipped away at the ore. The copper was not smelted yet, but it was collected, ground, and possibly used for pigment or decoration. At one site, WF4, a cache of malachite nodules was buried in a pit. Above them, a layer of ash. Above that, flat stones arranged like a lid. This layering was not functional, it was ceremonial. Wadi Fainan lies at a crossroads. To the west, the Jordan Valley. To the east, the Arabian Plateau. Southward, trade routes led to the Red Sea. The valley's position gave it access to movement and exchange. Shells from the coast, obsidian from the north, bitumen from the Dead Sea. These materials appear in burial contexts and ritual buildings. One striking feature of WF16 was a decorated skull placed alone in a shallow depression. Its cranium had been coated with red ochre. A stone pendant rested near the jaw. The skull was not buried with a body. It was curated, kept, moved, and eventually deposited. This practice echoes other Neolithic sites where skulls were removed, plastered, or displayed. The settlement itself was not large, perhaps a few dozen structures, but the repeated rebuilding of certain buildings suggests longevity. Some were dismantled and reconstructed in the same place. Their layout was circular, their alignment consistent, no writing remains, no symbols have been deciphered, but a pattern exists in the architecture. The ritual buildings were central, the homes peripheral. Movement through the site led inward from scattered dwellings to shared space. Burials were sparse but present. Most were placed in small pits beneath house floors. One contained an adult with a flint blade and a bone bead. Another held a child wrapped in matting. The dead were not excluded. They remained beneath the living. Environmental evidence suggests the region grew drier over time. Streams became seasonal. Vegetation thinned. But during the early Neolithic, Wadi Fainan supported life. Its soils were fertile. Its copper abundant. Its people anchored themselves to place. The architecture of WF16 shows technical skill. Walls were bonded with mud. Floors were layered with plaster. Post holes were shaped with precision. These were not temporary shelters. They were built to last. Outside the buildings, open spaces held hearths, ash mounds, and refuse pits. These areas were kept separate from the clean, formal interiors. There was an order, though unwritten. Activity moved in patterns, domestic, communal, sacred. Excavations are ongoing. Much of the valley remains unexplored. Satellite imagery shows shadows of buried walls, extending beyond the visible structures. Geophysical scans suggest more architecture beneath the surface. The shadow temples, as some researchers call them, were never massive. They lacked grandeur, but they were deliberate, they were clean, they were central, and they were repeated, generation after generation. Wadi Fainan is older than the first dynasties of Egypt. It predates writing, metallurgy, and urban planning, but it holds a blueprint, a place of community, resource gathering, and shared belief drawn into stone, held in earth, and marked by the silence of absence. The Forgotten Stones of Tartaria. In the gentle hills of modern-day Romania, along the Mureș River valley, lies the village of Tartaria. Quiet and unremarkable, it held no sign of ancient complexity until 1961. That year, during a routine excavation led by archaeologist Nicolae Vlasa, 3 small clay tablets were discovered in a Neolithic burial pit. The tablets were thin, oval, and rectangular. Their surfaces were marked with symbols, incised lines, loops, grids, and signs that seemed intentional. They became known as the Tartaria tablets, and for some, they represent the earliest form of writing ever found. The tablets were found alongside figurines, a stone amulet, and the burnt remains of a woman buried in an unusual manner. She was buried with rich grave goods, suggesting high status. The objects were dated to around 5000, 300 BCE, nearly 2,000 years before the first cuneiform texts of Sumer. This raised questions. Could writing have emerged first in the Balkans, not Mesopotamia? The symbols on the tablets were not random. One tablet featured a tree-like symbol. Another showed a grid with punctuated marks. The third carried a ring of signs arranged in a circle. Some symbols resembled later Sumerian signs. Others were unique. The clay had been baked, either intentionally or by accident. Their size suggested they were held in the hand. They had holes, possibly for stringing or carrying. The tablets were associated with the Vinča culture, a Neolithic tradition that flourished in the central Balkans between 5,700 and 4,500 BCE. The Vinča left behind hundreds of settlements across present-day Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary. Their houses were rectangular, built with wattle and daub, and arranged in planned layouts. Some settlements had streets, storage buildings, and signs of deliberate urban planning. Thousands of clay figurines have been recovered from Vinča sites. Many are abstract. Some show seated female forms with geometric decorations. Others show strange faces, wide hips, and stylized limbs. A few hold objects, bowls, tools, or nothing at all. Many have incised markings on their bodies. These markings resemble those found on the Tartaria tablets at Vinča Belo Brudo, near Belgrade. Over 1,500 ceramic fragments bearing symbols have been unearthed. Some were decorative, others seemed to carry repeated signs, carved or painted before firing. The same symbols appear on pottery, figurines, and spindle whorls. They include crossed lines, X shapes, triangles, ladders, and chevrons. Some are grouped together, some stand alone. Researchers remain divided. Some argue these are proto-writing, an early form of symbolic communication tied to ritual or administration. Others say they are decorative, without fixed meaning. The signs do not form long texts. They do not repeat in predictable ways. But their repetition across time and space suggests they were not casual. The Vinča people made tools from obsidian and bone. They wove textiles and wore jewelry of shell, bone, and stone. They built large settlements, some housing hundreds. They raised cattle, pigs, and sheep. They cultivated wheat and barley. They painted pottery in red, white, and black. Their cemeteries suggest social differentiation, but not rigid hierarchy. At Tartaria, the burial pit where the tablets were found was shallow. The woman's bones were burnt. The objects placed beside her had been carefully arranged. The tablets were not dropped, they were buried. Whether they belonged to her in life or were offerings for the dead is unknown. The discovery stirred debate. Nikolai Vlasa initially suggested the tablets were imported from Sumer. Later, he acknowledged their Neolithic context. Critics pointed out that the dating relied on associated materials, not the tablets themselves. Later analysis confirmed their antiquity, but doubts lingered. The idea that writing, or something close to it, could have emerged in Neolithic Europe challenged long-held assumptions. The Near East had long been seen as the cradle of writing, cities, and state formation. The Vinča culture, by contrast, left no palaces, no monumental architecture, no kings. Yet it produced symbols that may have conveyed meaning. If the Vinča signs were used for communication, what did they say? No one knows. They may have recorded ownership. They may have marked offerings. They may have carried sacred meaning, known only to initiates. Without translation, they remain mute. One theory suggests the symbols were part of a mnemonic system, cues for oral tradition or ritual performance. Another proposes they were clan symbols or personal marks. A few researchers have attempted decipherment, linking signs to early Indo-European roots. These attempts remain speculative. The Vinča culture declined around 4,500 BCE. The reasons are unclear. Shifts in climate, soil exhaustion, or social fragmentation may have played a role. The settlements were abandoned. The symbols faded. No successor adopted their sign system. Today, the Tartaria tablets are stored in a museum in Cluj-Napoca. Their inscriptions have been copied, compared, and scanned. They have not been explained. They remain undeciphered, unaligned with any known language. But their presence alongside the many symbols on Vinca artifacts marks a possibility. That in Neolithic Europe, before Egypt, before Sumer, people made signs. They pressed meaning into clay. They buried symbols with their dead. And they left behind questions that still turn beneath the soil. The sunken circles of Atlit Yam. Just off the coast of northern Israel, beneath a shallow layer of seawater, lies the remains of a village forgotten for thousands of years. The site is called Atlit Yam. Divers first noticed it in the 1980s, near the modern town of Atlit. At first it appeared to be little more than scattered stones, but further exploration revealed walls, hearths, wells, and a circle of upright stones. The entire village had been preserved beneath the sea. It was a Neolithic settlement, one of the oldest submerged in the world. Atlit Yam was occupied between 6,900 and 6,300 BCE. It stood on dry land at the time, part of a fertile coastal plain, close to fresh water with easy access to the sea. The people who lived there built rectangular houses with stone foundations and mud brick walls. Some homes were freestanding, others were built around shared courtyards. There were storage bins, grinding stones, and hearths for cooking. Fish bones and seashells were found throughout the site. The community relied on both agriculture and marine resources. One of the most striking features is a semicircle of 7 megaliths, each weighing up to 600 kilograms. These stones stand upright, arranged around a freshwater spring. Some have cut marks carved into their upper surfaces. Their arrangement appears intentional. The stones do not serve a structural purpose. They are not part of any house. Their position around the spring suggests a ceremonial function, perhaps connected to water, fertility, or seasonal gathering. Similar cut marks have been found at other Neolithic sites across the Levant and Europe. Their meaning is unclear. They may have held offerings. They may have marked solar alignments. At Atlit Yam, the combination of water, stone, and symmetry suggests ritual, but no inscriptions remain. The site also preserves human remains. At least 65 individuals were recovered, buried beneath floors and near the stone structures. The burials were simple, shallow pits, bodies placed in fetal position. Some graves were collective, others were isolated. A few showed signs of disease. 1 adult and 1 child were found with joint deformities and lesions, consistent with tuberculosis. This may be the oldest known case of the disease in humans. The bacteria were identified from bone samples using modern genetic techniques. Other remains revealed wear patterns on teeth, suggesting a diet of soft grains and cooked food. Bone tools and flint blades were also found. These tools were used for fishing, farming, and weaving. One structure contained net weights and fish hooks made from bone. This indicates organized fishing. The nearby sea provided sustenance, but also danger. Around 6,300 BCE, the site was abandoned. The reason was not gradual. The sea rose. Paleogeographic studies show that a post-glacial sea level rise inundated the coastal plain. The Mediterranean advanced inland. Atlit Yam was submerged. The salt water covered the houses, the wells, the graves. Over time, sediment sealed the site. This preserved the structures, like a time capsule beneath the waves. The freshwater well at the center of the settlement is still visible. Divers found it lined with stone, dug several meters deep. Its depth suggests that the community had knowledge of groundwater and the skill to access it. The presence of wells also implies planning access to fresh water was critical, especially near the sea. Traces of agriculture were found nearby. Pollen samples indicate the cultivation of wheat, barley, and legumes. Animal bones, goats, cattle, pigs were discovered in waste pits. Domesticated animals lived alongside humans. The settlement was part of the early transition from foraging to farming. Atlit Yam represents a society in transition between mobility and settlement, between wild and domesticated, between land and water. Its layout shows planning. Its structures show permanence. Its stone circle shows intention. Unlike many inland Neolithic sites, Atlit Yam was lost to rising seas. Most sites are buried by soil. This one was buried by salt water. The water preserved what the air would have erased. Excavations continue underwater. Divers use brushes and small tools. Sediment is vacuumed into filters and brought to the surface. The work is slow. Visibility is limited. But discoveries emerge: charcoal layers, worked flint, crushed shells, fragments of woven basketry. The stone circle remains in place, silent and submerged. It does not resemble Stonehenge. It is smaller, older, without decoration, yet it stands as one of the earliest known arrangements of standing stones anywhere in the world. Atlit Yam has no monuments, no gold, no walls, but it offers a glimpse into how early people shaped their world, gathering around springs, raising stones, burying their dead, and then watching the sea take it all. The ridgelines of Poverty Point. In the lower Mississippi Valley of what is now northeastern Louisiana, a series of concentric ridges curve across the land in quiet symmetry. From the ground, they appear as shallow rises, barely noticeable. From above, their design becomes clear. These are the earthworks of Poverty Point, one of the largest and most mysterious prehistoric sites in North America. Built between 1700 and 1100 BCE, the site predates classical civilizations of the Americas and stands as a monument raised not with stone, but with earth. Poverty Point was constructed by a society that left no written language. There were no known temples, no palaces, no carvings of rulers. And yet, the site spans nearly 900 acres. It includes 6 earthen ridges arranged in a vast arc, several large platform mounds, and evidence of long-distance trade. The ridges, evenly spaced and carefully aligned, once supported houses made of wattle and daub. Each arc spans over a kilometre in diameter. The construction required thousands of hours of labour, moved basket by basket. At the centre of the site lies a broad plaza, flat, open and empty. It measures over 15 hectares. To the west stands a massive earthen mound, now called Mound A. It rises 21 metres high and spans more than 200 metres across its base. Its shape is irregular. Some interpret it as a bird in flight with wings spread. Others see a more abstract design. What is certain is that it was built rapidly, possibly within 90 days, using an estimated 350 0 cubic meters of soil. The people who built Poverty Point were not farmers. Unlike Mesoamerican or Andean civilizations, there is no evidence of intensive agriculture. They relied on fishing, hunting, and gathering. Deer, fish, birds, nuts, and seeds made up their diet. Yet they organized labor on a monumental scale. The scale of Poverty Point rivals that of later civilizations built by agricultural societies. Artifacts found at the site suggest a wide network of exchange. Stone tools made from materials not native to the region, jasper from the Appalachians, obsidian from the Rockies, galena from Missouri, appear in workshop areas. These materials traveled hundreds of kilometers. Carved pendants, beads, and plummets, tear-shaped stones, thought to be weights or ritual objects, were shaped and polished on site. Clay cooking bowls used to heat food in earth ovens, appear in large numbers. Their design varies, some with marks or symbols pressed into the surface. Excavations reveal rows of post holes, evidence of timber structures, possibly ceremonial or communal. Their arrangement suggests solar alignments. Some researchers believe that the site may have functioned as a calendar, with sightlines aligned to solstices and equinoxes. The arcs of the ridges may have amplified sound or organized space for gatherings, rituals, or trade. Despite its complexity, the people of Poverty Point used simple tools. They had no metal, no wheels, no beasts of burden. Earth was moved using baskets and hands. The soil types clay, loam, silt were selected and layered. Mounds were built with internal support layers, resisting erosion and collapse. This shows engineering knowledge passed down through generations. Burials are rare at the site. Only a few human remains have been found, and none in formal tombs. The absence of elite graves or large-scale cemeteries suggests a society organized without kings or known religious classes. Authority, if it existed, left no visible markers. The function of Poverty Point remains unclear. Was it a trading center? A pilgrimage site? A ceremonial hub? Its position near the Mississippi River would have allowed easy access by canoe. The surrounding landscape, low wetlands, rivers, and hardwood forests provided food and materials, but no other site in the region matches its scale. After around 1100 BCE, construction ceased. The site was gradually abandoned. The reasons are unknown. Climate change, flooding, or shifts in trade routes may have contributed. The people did not disappear. They moved elsewhere. Later, cultures occupied the area, but none rebuilt the ridges. Poverty Point was rediscovered in the 19th century, but its significance wasn't fully understood until the 20th. In 2014, it was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Today, the ridges are mostly covered in grass. Mound A rises behind trees, quiet and still. From the air, the concentric lines remain visible like the impression of a forgotten logic. They curve outward, embracing a space that once held sound, movement, and presence. No texts remain, no images, only earth, arranged in patterns. The sand brick temples of Mehrgarh. In the vast plains of Balochistan, near the Bolan Pass in present-day Pakistan, an ancient settlement once stood quietly along the edge of the desert. Known today as Mehrgarh, this site predates the great cities of the Indus Valley Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro by several millennia. Its earliest layers go back to around 7000 BCE. Long before monumental temples, bronze tools, or written seals appeared, people lived here, farmed the land, shaped clay, and buried their dead with care. Mehrgarh was first excavated in the 1970s by a team of French archaeologists led by Jean-François Jarige. What they uncovered forced a re-evaluation of South Asia's deep past. Beneath the layers of later buildings and pottery were traces of one of the earliest Neolithic cultures in the region. The earliest dwellings at Mehrgarh were made from compacted mud bricks, sun-dried, simple and square. Each home had multiple rooms. Some had hearths, others had raised platforms. The layout was functional. There were no grand structures, no visible signs of social hierarchy, but the placement of rooms, storage bins, and working spaces indicated planning. People knew how to build to last. Mehrgarh's inhabitants cultivated wheat and barley. They also herded sheep, goats, and cattle. This was one of the earliest farming communities in South Asia. Yet they also hunted deer and gathered fruits and nuts from the surrounding hills. They lived between two worlds, farming and foraging, carefully balancing their environment. One of the most remarkable discoveries came from the burial sites. The dead were buried in shallow pits, often on their sides, with knees bent. Many were accompanied by grave goods, stone tools, baskets, beads, and sometimes figurines. These items suggest belief in an afterlife, or at least a custom of honoring the dead. Some burials included more than one individual, laid close together. Several individuals were found with drilled teeth. The holes were precise and shallow. Microscopic analysis revealed that they had been made using flint-tipped tools. This practice, dated to around 7000 BCE, represents the earliest known example of dental surgery. The work was delicate and localized evidence of skill and intent. Whether it was performed for pain relief, ritual, or status remains unknown. The people of Mehrgarh also worked with stone and clay. They made beads from steatite, turquoise, and lapis lazuli. These were polished and strung. Some were found in graves. Others were likely worn in life. Pottery appeared gradually. Early vessels were hand-shaped and undecorated. Later, they were painted with simple designs, lines, dots, and geometric shapes. One small structure, rectangular and freestanding, was different from the rest. It had thick walls, a plastered floor, and no domestic features. Some researchers believe it may have served a communal or ritual purpose, a proto-temple, though modest in form. Around it were found fired clay figurines, mostly female, with stylized features. Some had exaggerated hips and breasts. Others held small objects or animals. Their purpose remains unclear. As time passed, Mehrgarh changed. Around 5500 BCE, new materials appeared. Copper beads, kiln-fired pottery, wheat varieties that were not local. This suggests trade with distant regions. The site grew. Buildings became more complex. Storage silos and workshop areas emerged. A society once small and simple began to develop specialized roles. But still, no palaces, no writing, no known rulers. Authority, if it existed, left no carved names or grand statues. The community appears to have been structured through shared customs rather than centralized power. One area revealed rows of kilns, small, round, and blackened by repeated firing. These were used to make ceramics, figurines, and beads. Nearby, pits were filled with discarded objects, broken pots, worn tools, and damaged ornaments. The placement of waste was organized. Nothing was random. The region around Mehrgarh is dry today, but in the early Holocene, it was greener. Rivers flowed nearby. Rainfall supported crops. As conditions shifted, the settlement adapted. It expanded to new areas. Some zones were abandoned. Others were reused. By around 2600 BCE, the site declined. Its population moved eastward toward the Indus River. There, cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro would rise. But the foundations were laid at Mehrgarh through its agriculture, its technologies, and its social patterns. Mehrgarh's influence is seen in the continuity of practices, pottery styles, burial customs, urban planning. The seals and weights of the later Indus cities may trace their origins to the quiet mud brick lanes of this earlier world. Excavations at Mehrgarh continue. Some areas remain untouched, others have been lost to erosion. The site offers no monumental surprises, no towering ziggurats or buried treasure, but in its deep layers, it preserves something older and ordered life before the cities. The circles etched in Arabian stone. Across the basalt plains and wind-swept deserts of northern Arabia, thousands of low stone structures stretch across the land, some straight, others circular, some shaped like keys, gates, or lines stretching beyond the visible horizon. These features are called mustatils and desert kites. Only visible from the air, they were largely unknown to modern archaeology until recent decades. Their size and number suggest organized construction by ancient societies long before writing appeared in the Arabian Peninsula. Some of these structures date to as early as 6500 BCE. Mustatil means rectangle in Arabic. The first of these was formally described in the 1970s, but recent satellite imagery and field surveys have identified over 600 across Saudi Arabia. They are built from piled stone, low and narrow, often over 100 meters long. Most consist of two short ends connected by long parallel walls. At one end, there is usually a chamber or platform. Sometimes these enclosures are aligned in rows or grouped together. The builders moved thousands of stones to form each shape. Yet the walls are rarely more than a meter high. They were not defensive, and they were not homes. Excavations inside some mustatils revealed animal bones, particularly the skulls and horns of cattle and wild ungulates. These remains were placed deliberately, often at the closed end of the rectangle. There is no evidence of butchery or consumption. This suggests ritual, offerings, possibly symbolic, linked to livestock, fertility, or seasonal events. There is no sign of agriculture at these sites. The builders were herders and foragers, yet they invested time and labour into large-scale monuments, indicating shared beliefs, planning, and collective action. Nearby, other types of structures appear. The so-called desert kites consist of long converging stone lines leading into a circular or V-shaped enclosure. These are even larger, some stretch over several kilometers. From the air, they resemble kites or arrows. On the ground, they are barely visible. Archaeologists believe they were used for hunting. Herds of gazelle or oryx were funneled into the narrow ends, where they were trapped and killed. Radiocarbon dating places the oldest of these structures at over 90 years old. The sheer number of kites, estimated at more than 60 across the Levant and Arabian Peninsula, points to large-scale communal activity. Building one required surveying the land, placing stones in alignment, and coordinating labour over long distances. The people who made them had no metal tools, no wheels, no written plans. Yet the geometry is precise. Some lines extend for 2 kilometers without bending. In Al-Ula and Khaybar, in northwestern Saudi Arabia, aerial surveys conducted between 2018 and 2021 revealed massive concentrations of mustatils. One site had over 300 within a small area. Their alignment varied, but many pointed toward mountains or specific features in the landscape. Some mustatils were reused new walls built atop older ones, suggesting the continuation of rituals over centuries. Near certain mustatils, researchers found cairns and stone circles, simple rings of upright stones, some surrounding burials. The graves were shallow, the bodies placed with knees drawn up, sometimes oriented toward the rising sun. Objects placed nearby included beads, chipped flint tools, and animal remains. No written language accompanied the burials. No names, no records, only arrangement. The people of Neolithic Arabia lived in a changing environment. During the Holocene humid period, rainfall was higher. Grasslands spread across areas now covered in sand. Lakes formed. Herds moved freely. The mustatils seemed to mark this time of abundance, when people came together to build, to sacrifice, to align stone with belief. Then the climate shifted. Around 4000 BCE, the monsoons withdrew. The deserts expanded. Water sources dried. The great gatherings ended. The mustatils were left behind, their stones sinking slowly into the earth. Desert varnish, thin mineral coatings formed over time, now darkens their surfaces. They blend with the landscape. From the ground, they are almost invisible. From above, their patterns emerge like faint memories across the plain. Recent excavations have yielded new clues. In 2020, archaeologists uncovered a mustatil with over 100 cattle horns and skull fragments clustered in a stone chamber. Radiocarbon analysis dated the site to roughly 5200 BCE. The chamber was built with care stones fitted tightly, bones placed without signs of decay. The animals were not consumed, they were offered. There is no evidence of writing, no carvings, no statues. But the scale and repetition of forms suggest knowledge passed between groups. The mustatals were not isolated. They appeared across 200 square kilometers. This implies communication, shared customs, and coordination over vast distances. In later periods, nomadic peoples continued to build in stone cairns, tombs, and lines. But the earlier structures remained undisturbed. The desert preserved them. Even now, new ones are discovered every year. Drone surveys and remote sensing continue to reveal lines beneath the sand. These ancient stone forms, some long, some circular, some branching like trees, remain the oldest monumental architecture in Arabia, built not to house the living, but perhaps to speak to gods, ancestors, or the sky. Built before temples, before kings, before text. The mounds of the Ukrainian forest steppe. Scattered across the rolling plains and forest steppe of modern-day Ukraine and Moldova, strange circular patterns can still be seen from the ghostly outlines of ancient settlements, some stretching over hundreds of hectares. Beneath the soil lie burnt houses, clay figurines, and enormous burial mounds. These remains belong to the Tripilia culture, also known as Cucuteni Tripilia, one of the largest and least understood Neolithic societies in Europe. Its timeline spans from roughly 5,400 BCE to 2,700 BCE. At its height, it produced some of the largest settlements anywhere in the ancient world. The Tripilia people built their settlements in circular or elliptical layouts. Homes were made of timber and clay, placed in rings around open centres. Some sites like Talianki, Maidanetsky, and Dobrovody covered up to 300 hectares and housed an estimated 10 to 15 people. These were not cities in the traditional sense. There were no palaces, no temples, no fortifications, but they were vast, planned, and organised. Each house had a similar design. 1 or 2 rooms, clay floors, ovens, benches, and storage spaces. Walls were made from woven branches daubed with clay. Roofs were pitched and thatched. Many houses were decorated with red and white painted patterns, inside and out. These patterns repeated across pottery and figurines, swirls, waves, and nested spirals. The motifs may have had symbolic meaning, though their exact purpose remains unknown. A defining feature of Tripilia settlements is their pattern of destruction. Every few decades, entire villages were burned, not just abandoned, intentionally set on fire. Archaeologists have found thick layers of ash, melted clay, and collapsed roof beams. The fires were intense, likely controlled and coordinated. Some researchers believe these burnings were ritual, a symbolic act to close a cycle, purify space, or honour the dead. Others see practical motives, like pest control or structural renewal. Among the remains, figurines are common. Many are stylized female forms, broad hips, narrow waists, and emphasized thighs. Some are seated, others standing. A few appear to wear elaborate headgear. Others are abstract. These figures were not mass-produced. Each was handmade and unique. Some were buried. Others were found broken in layers of ash. Whether they represented deities, ancestors, or something else remains uncertain. In the wider forest steppe zone, large earthen mounds appear known as kurgans. Most belong to later cultures, such as the Yamnaya, but some early mounds are linked to late Tripilia phases. These mounds often contain central burials beneath stone slabs. The bodies are placed in crouched positions, sometimes accompanied by ceramic vessels, flint tools, and ornaments of copper or shell. The mounds are modest in height, but visible across the flat terrain. Tripilia pottery is distinctive, hand-built, painted, and fired in open pits. Early forms are simple. Later vessels become more elaborate, featuring curvilinear designs in red, black, and white. No two are identical. Many show signs of use. Others appear ceremonial. Some vessels were deliberately broken and deposited in pits. The Tripilia people practiced mixed farming. They cultivated wheat, barley, legumes, and flax. They raised cattle, pigs, and sheep. They hunted red deer and boar. They collected wild fruits, nuts, and honey. Tools were made from bone, stone, and occasionally copper. The earliest evidence of copper use in the region appears around 4500 BCE. It was hammered cold into beads, awls, and simple tools. Smelting came later. Despite the size of their settlements, the Tripilia people left no clear signs of hierarchy. There are no elite tombs, no monumental buildings, and no evidence of centralized authority. Power may have been communal or rotated seasonally. Some larger buildings found near the centers of settlements may have served ritual or administrative functions, but they differ only in scale, not in design. No writing has been found. Symbols do appear incised on pottery, painted on walls, or scratched into figurines, but they are isolated. Some resemble marks found in other Neolithic cultures of Old Europe. Others are unique. The symbols may have been mnemonic, ritual, or purely decorative. In the late 4th millennium BCE, many large settlements were abandoned. The reasons are debated. Climate fluctuations, soil exhaustion, or internal social shifts may have played a role. Another theory suggests contact and eventual conflict with steppe groups moving westward. The Tripilia culture dissolved, but its elements continued in smaller regional traditions. Satellite imagery continues to reveal new settlement outlines, circular patterns beneath farmland, faint traces of ditches and housing rows. Excavations reveal charred walls, painted sherds, and buried clay altars. But much of the culture remains unexcavated. The scale is too vast, the layers too deep. The legacy of Tripilia lies not in stone monuments, but in patterns of repetition, of fire, of carefully aligned houses across empty centres. Each burned village became a layer, sealed in earth, waiting for rediscovery. The island with no harbour. Failaka Island rests quietly in the northern waters of the Persian Gulf, about 20 kilometres off the coast of Kuwait. Today, it is largely silent, wind-swept, flat, and edged by rocky beaches. But beneath its surface, and across scattered fragments of eroded stone, lies evidence of a settlement that once held meaning. Its builders are not named in the inscriptions of Egypt or Sumer. Their language is unknown, but their walls remain. Excavations in the 1950s by Danish archaeologists uncovered layers of habitation extending back to the early 2nd millennium BCE. But beneath those later levels, deeper into the soil, signs of older presence appeared. Tools without decoration. Pottery shards bearing a style distinct from the known Dilmun culture. Flat stones laid in rows, without mortar, following patterns inconsistent with later construction. Some formed courtyards, others storage pits. No grand temples have been found, no palaces, only rooms rectangular, low, and practical. Their orientation avoids the shoreline. Instead, they face inland, toward what was once a freshwater spring, now dry. There is no natural harbour. The island is not sheltered. Winds batter the coast. The waves pull hard. And yet, people settled here. One explanation suggests that Failaka served as a waypoint between the river cities of Mesopotamia and the deeper waters of the southern Gulf. The island's location fits a corridor that may have been active centuries before Egypt's pyramids rose. Sumerian texts refer to a land called Dilmun, pure, sacred, a place where goods were exchanged. While some place Dilmun in Bahrain, others point to Failaka as part of its network. But these earlier layers do not resemble trade outposts. They are not built for merchants. There are no warehouses, no docks, only homes, hearths, and grain storage. In one structure, unearthed in 1978, a series of limestone basins were found arranged in a crescent. Each had a drainage hole. Each was set on a flat, compacted floor. The surrounding wall was partially collapsed, but the curvature remained visible. Some researchers proposed ritual use. Others suggested water processing, perhaps salt extraction or fermentation. No tools were found nearby. The pottery fragments carry thick rims, deep bowls, and utilitarian forms. Some show soot, others lime residue. All are handmade, with minimal ornamentation. The clay differs from that of the mainland, indicating local production. One artifact stands out: a seal made of chlorite, featuring a horned animal and a figure standing with arms extended. The figure is not Sumerian. The proportions differ. The stylization is unfamiliar. It was found near the center of a collapsed room in a layer dated to roughly 2200 BCE, but some soil layers beneath that suggest even earlier occupation. Radiocarbon samples from charcoal remains place certain features as early as 2600 BCE, possibly older. These include post holes arranged in circles, suggesting temporary structures or tented housing. This transitional phase from mobile to fixed indicates a slow settlement, not a sudden foundation. No writing has been recovered. The people who lived here may have never developed a script, or perhaps they used materials, not preserved wood, cloth, or wax. What endures are stone weights, grinding stones, and shells cut into discs, possibly used for decoration or exchange. The island's geology does not favor permanence. Winds erode. Salt eats through layers. And yet, Failaka was returned to repeatedly. Each phase of occupation builds near the last, as if memory lingered even after abandonment. Later, during the first millennium BCE, Greeks would settle on the island, renaming it Icaros. They built temples, roads, and inscriptions. Those ruins now stand atop the older ones. But none of the Greek texts mention the people who came before. No names were preserved, no myths carried forward. In the northern stretch of the island, buried beneath sand and thorny brush, lies a stretch of interlocking stone platforms, flat, undecorated, and slightly inclined. Their purpose is unknown. They do not lead anywhere. They do not elevate anything. Some suggest they were for drying fish, others for ceremonies lost to time. In the quiet, the island offers little narrative. There are no towering statues, no tombs, only fragments. Yet Failaka's earliest layers remind us that even barren islands, with no harbour and no protection, once held life. A pattern of settlement emerges across the Gulf, a subtle line of memory stretching from the Zagros Mountains to the Indian Ocean. Failaka sits within that line, not as a centre, not as a capital, but as a mark of passage, a still point between lands. Today, birds rest on its stones, the waves rise and fall without interruption, and beneath the sand, foundations remain, slowly returning to the earth. They left no names, no dates, no kings to remember, only structures, stones, and silent patterns carved into the landscape. The deeper we dig, the less certain the timeline becomes. Beneath the monuments we know are layers of others older, quieter, built by hands we cannot trace. The story of civilization may not begin where we thought, and perhaps it never truly began, but simply shifted, moved, and was buried, forgotten by design or forgotten by time. If you found stillness in these lost places, if you felt the weight of their silence, then this journey is far from over. There are more questions hidden beneath the surface, more pieces scattered across forgotten valleys, sunken islands, and mountains no one climbs anymore. Join us again as we continue to search for what was never meant to be found.